I woke up gasping for air, my lungs burning as though I had been drowning. But when my vision cleared, I was back in my apartment again. The couch was crooked against the wall, the fridge hummed faintly, and the light above the kitchen table buzzed in that broken way it always had. For a moment I clung to it, to the familiarity, telling myself it was real this time, that maybe I had collapsed on the path and my mind had retreated here as a last defense. But then I saw it, the sigil. It was faint at first, glowing in the corner of my vision, scrawled into the paint on the wall just above the couch, crimson lines curling into impossible patterns, shapes that twisted whenever I tried to focus on them. I blinked hard, rubbed my eyes, but it didn't fade. It spread. Another sigil carved itself across the fridge door, glowing faint red, pulsing like a heartbeat. And when I looked down at my arms, I saw them too, burned into my skin, glowing faintly through the veins. My body shook as I clawed at my sleeves, but the light only grew brighter, moving with the rhythm of my blood. Then Pixel jumped onto the table. Her paws landed soft against the wood, but when she lifted her head, her eyes were wrong again, pupils wide until they swallowed the green completely, black mirrors staring straight through me. She blinked once, and sigils appeared in her eyes, glowing deep inside, burning symbols where pupils should have been. She tilted her head, and in my voice, clear and steady, she whispered, "Michael, it's already here." My chest tightened, my vision blurring as I staggered back into the hallway. The apartment warped around me. The door to the bedroom wasn't a door anymore. It was iron, tall and jagged, with chains draped across it. I blinked, and it was just wood again, paint chipped and handle loose, but when I touched it, the surface burned cold, too cold, as though something was breathing on the other side. I turned away, stumbling into the bathroom, but that was worse. The mirror above the sink was gone. In its place was a gate, black iron bars stretching floor to ceiling, wet with condensation. Beyond it was mist, thick and endless, and deep within it something moved, shapes pressing against the bars with slow, deliberate weight. My knees buckled. I'd seen this before. The third gate, the one I wasn't supposed to speak of. But now it wasn't hidden on the path. It was in my bathroom, humming softly like it had always been there, waiting for me to notice. I grabbed the sink, knuckles white, whispering to myself, "I'm still home. This is my apartment. This isn't real." But the reflection in the faucet wasn't me. It was the other one, the double. His eyes hollow, his mouth twisted into that grin I hated, mouthing words I couldn't hear but felt all the same. I shoved away from the sink and stumbled back into the living room, clutching at my head. The fridge wasn't humming anymore. The light wasn't buzzing. The entire apartment had gone silent, the kind of silence that presses against your eardrums until it feels like your skull is cracking. I dropped to the floor, pressing my hands against my ears, and that was when the voice came. Not from the walls, not from Pixel, from everywhere at once. "Containment breach confirmed. Subject MB unstable. Initiate termination protocol." The words weren't shouted. They were clinical, detached, the kind of voice you'd hear from an intercom, but they carved through me like knives. Termination. My pulse thundered, and I crawled to the window, tearing the blinds open. Outside, the city stretched just as it always had, cars moving, people walking, lights glowing. Normal. But the longer I stared, the more it flickered. The street lamps bent into crooked iron posts, glowing faint yellow like the lamps on the path. The sidewalk split into black glass, veins of red glowing beneath. And the people, God, the people. Some of them walked like normal, but others staggered, hollow-eyed, their mouths moving in whispers I couldn't hear through the glass. I stumbled back, whispering, "No, no, no." But the apartment warped again, walls breathing, floor cracking. I realized then that the containment wasn't just breaking. It had already failed. The path wasn't a place anymore. It wasn't separate. It was here. It was everywhere. And there was no way to tell where it ended, and I began. I collapsed onto the couch, burying my face in my hands, trying to think, trying to anchor myself to anything real. The fabric beneath my fingers was soft, familiar, but when I pulled my hands away, they were smeared red, The sigil burned into the cushion. My breath hitched. I could feel it now, the slow crawl of the path inside me, threading through my veins, rewriting me with every beat of my heart. I don't know if I'm still in my apartment. I don't know if I ever came back. Every wall feels like a gate, every reflection like a threat, and every shadow like it's waiting for me to remember something worse. The rules are still there, etched into my blood, shifting with every breath. But the one that terrifies me most is the one that hasn't appeared yet. The one that I know is coming, the one that tells me what happens when the path no longer belongs to me alone, when it belongs to everyone. And in the silence, I swear I heard Pixel whisper again, her voice soft and steady, echoing from the darkness. They can't contain you anymore, Michael. Now the world will have to. The walls of my apartment shivered as if something pressed against them from the other side, and for a moment I thought they would burst. The sigils crawling across the paint pulsed brighter, their lines shifting until they no longer looked like writing at all, but like chains pulling me toward the center of the room. I blinked, and the apartment was gone. I stood in a cavern of glass and mist. Above me, the ceiling bent like warped stone, dripping with condensation that hissed when it touched the ground. And before me stretched 7 gates. They weren't lined neatly in a row. They towered one over the other, stacked and crooked, woven together like ribs of some enormous skeleton. Each was different, iron, bone, stone, shadow, but each breathed, groaning as though it held back something desperate to be free. The air around them bent and cracked, a hum so deep it rattled my teeth. My knees weakened as I tried to count them, whispering under my breath, 1, 2, 3... and the paper in my pocket burned so violently I almost screamed. I yanked it out, and a new line of red had already written itself across the bottom. Rule 23. Do not count the gates aloud. My stomach lurched. I'd nearly broken it without even knowing. I forced myself to look silently instead, to let my eyes move across them. The first was iron, jagged, drenched in rust that dripped like blood. The second was carved of bone, its surface etched with names I didn't recognize. The third was worse. Black bars twisted into spirals, slick with moisture, and behind them something moved, pressing against the metal with wet, dragging sounds. I couldn't see its shape, only its hunger. My throat closed. This was the one the first rule had forbidden me to speak of, the one I had already glimpsed in my bathroom mirror. And yet as I stared, I heard it. My name. Michael. It slid through the bars like a breath, soft and deliberate. My knees buckled and I slammed the paper back into my pocket, whispering a prayer I didn't believe in. But the voice didn't stop. It came again, louder this time, shaking the iron until droplets of condensation fell like rain. Michael, open it. You've already broken the locks. You already belong here. I pressed my hands against my ears, backing away, but the voice slid inside my skull, stretching my name until it wasn't mine anymore. My head throbbed with every syllable. The rules whispered against my skin, glowing through my veins. Another line scrawled across my memory, though I didn't need the paper to read it. Do not open what cannot be closed. I stumbled further back, but the path betrayed me. The floor cracked open beneath my boots, and suddenly I was standing closer to the fourth gate. It loomed higher than the others, carved from something that looked like obsidian, edges glowing faintly with green fire. Behind it, shadows writhed like smoke alive. I swore I saw faces pressing against the stone, mouths open in silent screams. But when I blinked, they were gone. The fifth gate was chains suspended in midair, links hanging without support, each link burning faintly gold. The sixth was glass, cracked and dripping, reflecting not the cavern but endless versions of me, each pressing against the surface with desperate hands. The seventh was the worst. It wasn't built of anything. It was absence, a void framed by stone archways, and even looking at it made my stomach twist as though I was staring into something that wanted to devour not just me, but every part of reality. I clutched my chest, gasping, unable to look at them all at once. Every time my eyes moved from one to the next, the world shifted, bending, as though each gate carried its own gravity. The iron rust dripped into the bone, the shadows leaked into the glass, the chains wrapped themselves around the void. They weren't separate. They were feeding into each other, a prison layered on top of itself, each gate sealing another until none of them could be broken without tearing the others apart. The voice from the third gate whispered again, louder now, pulsing in rhythm with my heartbeat. "Michael, you can't fight us. You are already here. Open the way." My throat tightened as I stumbled to my knees. The mist curled around me, pulling me closer, chains rattling in the dark. I forced my eyes away, tried to anchor myself, but the more I looked, the less real my body felt. My arms blurred, my legs shifted. One moment I was standing in my apartment, the fridge humming behind me, Pixel's eyes gleaming black. The next, I was kneeling before the gates, sweat dripping into the glass floor. Reality bent, snapped, reformed with every breath. I whispered to myself, "I don't know if I'm at home. I don't know if I'm still on the path." My voice cracked, breaking into sobs. "I don't know where I am anymore." And then the gates all groaned at once. The sound split the air, 1,000 chains rattling, and the mist surged toward me like a living wave. I clutched the paper in my pocket, praying, begging. But the words burned through me regardless. A new line seared into my mind, cold and final. "You are walking all 7 at once." The whisper from the third gate still echoed in my skull when the world shifted again. I blinked, and the cavern was gone. I was back in the apartment, except it wasn't my apartment anymore. The walls sagged inward, wet with condensation, and sigils bled through the wallpaper like mold. The buzzing light above the kitchen table flickered once, twice, then flared so bright I had to shield my eyes. When it dimmed, I realized I wasn't alone. At first, I thought they were shadows, shapes in the periphery, barely formed, drifting along the edges of the room. But when I focused, the shadows sharpened into people. Thin, hunched, broken people. Their skin was pale, their eyes hollow, and each one moved with the same staggering rhythm. Slow steps, shoulders heavy like puppets forced to walk a stage long after the audience had left. My chest tightened when I recognized their faces, the cashier from the corner store, the bus driver I used to nod at every morning, a man from the train. Strangers, but not strangers. Faces I had seen once and never thought of again. They stood in my living room, their mouths working as if chewing words that never came. My stomach twisted with dread, because I knew the truth. These weren't people anymore. They were guards, the ones who had come before me, the ones who had failed. One of them tilted his head, jerking like his neck was broken, and his voice rasped out, low and hollow. "Guard the gates, guard the kingdom, do not let them pass." The words were flat, rehearsed, as if he had been saying them for centuries, and as he spoke, the others joined in, their voices layered together, broken and out of sync, chanting the same lines. "Guard the gates, guard the kingdom." I stumbled back against the wall, clutching the paper in my pocket like it was a lifeline, but the guards didn't move toward me. They only stared, their hollow eyes fixed on me with something worse than hatred. Recognition. I shook my head violently, whispering, "No, you're not me. You can't be me." But the paper burned hotter, and a new line scratched itself across the inside of my skull. They are the versions that failed. I tried to close my eyes, to will them away, but when I opened them again, the scene had changed. I was standing outside, on the street below my apartment. Cars rolled past, people walked by, all of it normal at a glance. But between them were others, the same pale, staggering figures, weaving through the crowd unnoticed. Nobody else saw them. Nobody reacted when a guard brushed their shoulder or whispered in their ear or stared with those hollow eyes. It was as if I was the only one who could see that the world was bleeding into the path. One of them stood still at the far end of the street, motionless in the flow of pedestrians. My blood ran cold when I saw him. His shoulders slouched exactly like mine, his hands tucked into the same old coat I wore, his boots scuffed the same way. He lifted his head and I was staring at myself. Not the twisted double from before, but a perfect reflection. except his eyes were hollow. I froze. My reflection didn't move closer, didn't speak, just stared at me across the distance. But then another whisper filled my head, clear and sharp. "Michael, you've been here before." My knees buckled. I knew the voice. It was mine, but not mine, older, broken. The guards around me stopped chanting, their mouths closing in unison, and all at once they turned their heads toward the figure that wore my face. He raised his arm slowly, pointing directly at me, and the guards obeyed. They began to walk. Their steps were deliberate, heavy, the chant resuming in a deeper tone. "Guard the gates, guard the kingdom, guard the path." I stumbled backward, bumping into a passerby, but when I looked up, the man was gone, replaced by another guard, hollow-eyed and silent. The crowd had shifted. The whole street was filled with them now, every face pale, every body moving toward me. I ran. My legs burned as I shoved through the sea of guards, their hands brushing against me like cold wires. But no matter how far I pushed, they were always there. The city warped around me, streetlights bending into tutu, crooked lamps, asphalt splitting into black glass. I turned a corner and skidded to a stop. Standing there, waiting, was the reflection again. Me. His lips curled into a grin, teeth yellow and broken, and his voice cut the air. "You cannot run from yourself." The paper seared against my hand, and another rule scrawled itself into my mind. Rule 24. Do not follow the guard that wears your name. I didn't want to. I didn't want to follow him. But the guards behind me pressed closer, their chant rising until it was deafening. My reflection tilted his head and began to walk, and my legs betrayed me, dragging me after him. Every step felt wrong, like I was walking deeper into my own grave. The world flickered, shifting between city streets and the path, neon signs warping into sigils, buildings dissolving into mist. The line between real and unreal was gone, and the only constant was the chant of the guards, echoing from every mouth and every hollow throat. I whispered to myself, broken, terrified. I don't know if I'm awake, I don't know if I'm alive. But the guards answered for me, their voices a wall of sound. You are walking, you are remembering. You will not leave whole. And I knew then that the return of the guards wasn't a haunting, it was a warning. They weren't chasing me to kill me. They were chasing me because I was becoming them. I don't remember how I ended up back inside the apartment. One moment I was running through streets that weren't streets anymore, swallowed by guards who all wore faces I half recognized, and the next I was slamming the door shut behind me, gasping for breath in the stale air of my living room. My chest heaved, my skin burned with sigils that wouldn't fade, and the paper in my pocket pulsed as though it had grown a heartbeat of its own. I tried to convince myself I was safe here, at least for a moment, but when I looked up I saw the bathroom door. It was open. The mirror was waiting for me. I tried to look anywhere else, the couch, the fridge, the blinds still half drawn over the window, but my eyes kept dragging back to that rectangle of darkness. It didn't even shine anymore. The glass had gone dull, fogged over from the inside, and within it I could see faint movement, a shadow pacing. I told myself not to go closer. I told myself I could just leave. But my legs didn't listen. The closer I stepped, the clearer the shadow became. At first it was just a shape, tall and slouched, moving with that familiar tilt of the head. Then it sharpened. And of course, it was me. He stood inside the mirror, the bathroom behind him twisted into something unrecognizable, mist curling against black walls, chains dangling from nowhere, faint lamps flickering overhead. He smiled when he saw me, that same too-wide grin that stretched the skin of my face in ways it was never meant to stretch. I wanted to turn and run, but the paper burned in my pocket again, searing through fabric and flesh. When I yanked it out, a new line had already written itself across the bottom in wet red strokes. Rule 21. Never bargain with yourself. My throat tightened. I didn't need the warning spelled out. I knew what was coming. The reflection lifted its hand, pressing it against the inside of the glass. I froze, every instinct telling me not to raise my own, but the longer I stared, the more my body betrayed me. My palm lifted until it hovered an inch from the cold surface. The reflection chuckled, low and jagged, and spoke in my voice, warped like a recording that had been played too many times. "You're close, Michael. Closer than any of us have ever come. But you can't walk the rest of the path alone. The throne demands a keeper. You don't want it to be you." I shook my head violently, forcing my hand back to my side. "I don't want any of this. I just want to go home." The reflection tilted its head further, mocking. "Home? There is no home anymore. Look around you. The sigils are in your walls, in your blood, in your cat's eyes. The path has already followed you. You can't escape it." I backed away, heart hammering, but his voice cut through me, sharp and relentless. "I can help you. I can carry the weight. You just have to let me out." The glass rippled like water when he pressed harder against it, his hand sinking partway through as though the barrier was thinning. My stomach turned. If he stepped through, there would be two of us, and if the rule was right, neither of us would leave whole. I shook my head again, whispering, "No deals, no bargains." But he only smiled wider. "Do you think you'll survive if you refuse? The breach is spreading, the gates are opening, the kingdom is awake. If you don't take my hand, if you don't let me help, then the path will consume everything, your neighbors, your city, your world. Is that what you want?" My breath faltered. The images clawed at me. Streets splitting into black glass, people I knew staggering hollow-eyed, pixel whispering in my own voice. I pressed my back against the wall, shaking my head until tears blurred my vision. "You're lying." He chuckled again. "Maybe, maybe not. But you've already broken the rules, haven't you? You spoke to me. You listened. You trusted the one that wears your face. There's no turning back. The only choice you have now is whether you'll do it willingly or whether the path will force it." The mirror pulsed with light, and for an instant I saw not my bathroom, but the throne again. Its chains rattling, the black stone slick with something that dripped down its arms. I saw the soldiers marching the walls of the forgotten kingdom, their chants shaking the air. I saw myself among them, hollow-eyed and silent, repeating words I didn't understand. My reflection's voice grew louder, overlapping with the chant. "Sit upon the throne, and I'll take your place. You'll be free. Refuse, and you'll lose more than your name. You'll lose yourself piece by piece until you're nothing but another guard, another ghost whispering warnings to the next Michael that walks the path." The paper seared my palm, another line scratching itself into my mind. Rule 22. Do not let them end you. I collapsed to my knees, sobbing, my body trembling so violently I thought I would split apart. My reflection pressed harder, his arms sliding further through the glass, the surface warping around him. His grin widened until it split his face. "Choose, Michael. Let me out, or let everything burn." I squeezed my eyes shut, but the voice filled the room, filled my skull, louder than my own thoughts. The silence that followed was worse. I opened my eyes and the mirror was still there, still pulsing, still waiting. My reflection had pulled his arm back, his smile calm again, almost patient. "Not tonight, then," he whispered, "but the throne doesn't wait forever." The glass fogged over once more, hiding him from view, but his presence lingered in the air like smoke. The rules pulsed in my veins, hot and heavy, and I knew I hadn't won. I'd only delayed. The first time I saw it, I thought I was losing my mind completely. The air in my living room bent, warping like heat haze, and in the middle of it, where the rug used to be, a shadow stretched across the floor. It wasn't the shadow of anything in the apartment. It was the outline of the throne, tall and jagged, its arms sharp as blades, its back spiked like a crown. The shape wavered, flickering as though it were being projected from somewhere else. But the chains made it real. They tore through the walls, heavy black links forcing their way into the room, cutting across the ceiling and digging into the floor. They didn't belong to this space, but they existed. Their weight-bending furniture, rattling glass, tearing gouges in the wood. Every time one tightened, the walls groaned, the floor shuddered, and the shadow of the throne pulsed brighter, like a heart beating on the other side of reality. I backed into the corner, shaking, whispering to myself that it wasn't real, that this was another hallucination, another test. But then the building shook. Dust rained from the ceiling, lights flickered, and muffled screams echoed from the hall outside. I opened the door and nearly collapsed at the sight. The throne's shadow wasn't just in my apartment anymore. It stretched down the hallway, painted across the floor and walls, linking every door, every ceiling light, every crack in the plaster. Chains as thick as tree trunks pushed through the drywall, slicing into the tile, humming with a low vibration that made my teeth ache. My neighbors were out in the corridor, wide-eyed, staring at it. Mrs. Kwan from 3B clutched her rosary, muttering a prayer in broken English. The young couple from 4A held their baby tight, eyes darting to the chains as if afraid they would lash out. None of them saw the path before. None of them could, but now they stood inches from it, their faces pale with a fear they couldn't name. "What is that?" one of them whispered. I wanted to tell them the truth. I wanted to scream that it was my fault, that it wasn't theirs to carry, but the words froze in my throat. The paper in my pocket burned, another rule carving itself into me. Rule 25. Do not tell them what binds you. Before I could move, the chains shifted, and the throne's shadow crawled further down the hall. The walls cracked, the air thickened, and mist bled from the edges of the floor like smoke. My neighbors stumbled back, choking, their eyes glassing over as the fog reached them. I shouted for them to run, but it was too late. The moment the mist touched their skin, they froze. Their mouths opened in unison, whispering words in a language I couldn't understand. I slammed the door shut, heart pounding, but it didn't stop. I ran to the window and pulled the blinds aside. What I saw made me sick. The city was breaking. From my vantage, I could see the skyline bending, neon lights flickering into sigils, skyscrapers stretching like melted wax. Chains cut through the streets, massive black links bursting through pavement and vanishing into the sky. Mist curled from sewer grates, street lamps flickered into the crooked yellow lamps I had seen on the path, and people, ordinary people, stumbled, clutched their heads and froze as the fog claimed them. Cars screeched to a halt, horns blared, but the sound warped, bent, until it was the same low chant I had heard from the guards. The breach wasn't mine anymore. It was everywhere. I fell back against the wall, clutching my head, screaming for it to stop. But the voice came again, that calm, detached tone. Containment has failed. Subject MB has breached. Expansion confirmed. I wanted to fight it, to claw the sigils off my arms, to tear the paper apart once and for all, but then I heard something else. A faint, familiar sound. A meow. Pixel stood in the doorway, tail swishing, her eyes black pits that reflected nothing. She walked toward me slowly, unbothered by the mist curling at her paws, and leapt onto the table. Her mouth opened, and this time it wasn't my voice that came out. It was the calm voice of the organization. Anchor stable. Containment tether intact. My blood froze. I stared at her, shaking, whispering, "No, no, you're just a cat. You're just a cat." But she tilted her head, the sigils in her eyes pulsing in rhythm with mine. "You thought she was yours," the voice said, but her lips didn't move. "She was never yours. She was ours. An anchor. A tether to keep you here. Without her, the path would have lost you." I fell to my knees, sobbing, the truth unraveling in front of me. Every night Pixel sat at my side, every time her meows pulled me back from panic, every time her warmth kept me in place. It wasn't love. It wasn't comfort. It was control. She had been placed there from the beginning, a spy, a chain disguised as a companion. Pixel blinked slowly, and for an instant, I thought I saw the outline of the throne reflected in her eyes. My voice cracked as I whispered, "Why me? Why do this to me?" Her tail flicked, and the voice answered, cold as ever. "Because you remember, and you resist." The chains tightened, pulling against the walls until the building groaned. Through the window, I saw the throne's shadow rising higher, stretching across rooftops, its spiked crown silhouetted against the sky. The mist spread like wildfire, swallowing block after block, and the people caught in it staggered into lines, chanting, their eyes hollow. The guards weren't just returning. The whole city was becoming them. I pressed my forehead against the floor, shaking, whispering to myself that this couldn't be real, that I had to be trapped in the path still, but the floor was cold and solid beneath me. Too real. The breach wasn't just in my head anymore. It had crossed over, and the path was no longer mine alone. The city was already breaking when the voice came again, calm and unshaken, as though nothing had changed. Containment protocol has failed. Subject MB has breached. Terminate if necessary. The words didn't echo from the walls this time. They came from everywhere. The air, the chains rattling against the ceiling, the mist seeping through the cracks of my apartment door. It wasn't a warning anymore. It was an order. I staggered back against the window, my hands trembling, my breath short. Terminate. The words stuck in my head, pounding like a hammer, until the paper in my pocket burned hot enough to sear my skin. I yanked it out, and across its bottom a final line of red carved itself slowly, painfully, as if written with blood dripping one letter at a time. Rule 22. Do not let them end you. The lights above me flickered once, twice, then flared white. Boots thundered in the hallway outside, real boots, human boots. I heard the scrape of gear, the click of weapons, the steady orders barked in sharp voices. My stomach dropped. They were here. The organization had sent people, not voices, not illusions, real soldiers. The door shuddered as something slammed against it, then burst open with a crash that rattled the glass in the windows. Figures flooded in, 5, maybe 6, dressed in black armor, faces hidden behind visors. They moved like professionals, scanning the room with rifles raised, voices crackling through radios. Subject located. Initiating termination protocol. I froze in the corner, my body numb, unable to move. I wanted to scream at them, to beg them to see, to tell them the breach wasn't just mine anymore, but my voice stuck in my throat. The mist pooled at their boots, curling higher, wrapping around their legs like a living thing. One of them barked, "Visual anomaly detected!" Another hissed into the R radio, "We've got contamination." Then the lights flickered again. For half a heartbeat they were still soldiers, real people, flesh and blood. But when the bulb sparked and the shadows snapped across the room, they weren't. The visors shattered like glass, faces stretching into hollow masks, eyes black pits that swallowed the light. Their rifles melted into rusted blades, jagged and wrong, chains wrapping around their armor until they weren't armor at all but bone and shadow. The men who had burst in to end me were gone. What stood in their place were warriors of the kingdom, hollow-eyed, their mouths chanting words that didn't belong in any human throat. The floor vibrated beneath their steps. The throne's shadow pulsed darker in the middle of my living room, its outline clearer now, jagged crown rising higher, arms slick with crimson glow. Chains yanked tighter through the walls, binding everything in place, as though the apartment itself had become part of the kingdom. I pressed my back against the glass, shaking, whispering, "No, no, no." But the paper burned again in my hand, the final rule searing across my veins like fire. Do not let them end you. But how could I stop them? They weren't soldiers anymore. They weren't human. And still, beneath the chant, I could hear faint echoes of their real voices, begging, screaming, trapped in the transformation. The path hadn't just claimed me anymore. It was claiming them. The nearest one raised his blade, its edge dripping with black mist, and for a moment I saw his visor flash back into place, his human face behind it, terrified eyes meeting mine. He mouthed something. "Run," before the light snapped again and the mask dissolved back into hollow bone. There was no running. The breach had swallowed the city, and now it had swallowed them. I knew with a sick certainty that there was no longer a boundary. Path and reality had fused, sewn together by chains I couldn't see the ends of. The throne's shadow deepened, It spiked back almost solid now, its crown scraping the ceiling. The guards, no, the soldiers who had become guards, closed in, their chant shaking the glass in the window. Guard the gates, guard the kingdom, guard the throne. My breath came ragged, tears burning in my eyes, as I realized the truth I had been trying to avoid since the first night. There was no more containment, no more separation, and no way back to what I had called a life. When the lights flickered one last time, I saw myself sitting on the throne, chains binding my arms, Pixel at my feet, her eyes glowing red. Then the lights snapped back, and the warriors were a step closer, blades raised, the chant louder than my thoughts. And I understood. The breach wasn't mine anymore. It belonged to everyone, and the path wasn't waiting. It was here.